Hey everybody, it's EK from ekgormandesigns.com, and I am coming in today with a fun St. Patrick's themed art journal page for Oddball Art using the Hadley and her hairdresser. But first, I have something really important I need to say. Yesterday, this showed up in my mailbox. It was a B14 marker, and on my last Oddball video, I made a joke about not having a B14, and mysteriously one appeared in my mailbox. Now, since my address isn't actually public record, it might be, but not to my knowledge is my address public record. I'm fairly certain this marker showed up from Lizzie, the owner of Oddball Arts. And I want to say thank you in the most public way I can. Yes, I'm aware only 3 people actually watched this video. My 8-year-old, my mother, and Lizzie. But I wanted to do this in a public way instead of a private message. Lizzie, it is a pleasure working for you. You are really one of the great bosses out there. Now on to today's project. There is a monthly challenge over at Oddball Art, and this month is a Leprechaun themed one. But really, every month the Oddball Art challenge is a anything goes with anything goes oddball. Like you pull out an oddball image and you can go to town. Now remember, there is a weekly free digital image that comes in with the Creepy Cute newsletter. So even those images will apply. So really, we're just wanting to see how you play with Oddball Art projects. So I thought it might be fun if I pulled out an image that had nothing to do with St. Patrick's Day, or leprechauns, or shamrocks, and turned it into, oh, there's the B14 being used! Turned it into showed how you can turn a non-St. Patrick's themed day project into a fun St. Patrick's theme. You get what I'm saying. I'm going to turn this image into a St. Patrick's themed deed. Wow, English is hard. A St. Patrick's themed project. And I thought, I'll do it in my art journal because I haven't done it for a long time. But first, I wanted to color up this fun image. I've always kind of thought this one was kind of kookily cute. Frankly, if a spider that size was anywhere in my vicinity, I would learn to fly to escape. Yes, I don't like spiders. I will happily kill them when they're in my house, and my son will happily capture them and release them back into the wild. So, depending on which one of us gets to the spider first is what happens in this household. The girls just stand and scream. But I think this image is hilarious because this is not the reaction I would be having if a giant spider was sitting on my head playing with my hair. I would be doing that flailing, jumping thing. But I wanted to color the image up with my Copic markers. So I printed it out actually really big because I knew I was going to pull my 5x7-inch art journal out. So I didn't want this tiny little image that I would normally put on a card inside the art journal because it'd be a waste of space. And I'd planned on giving her a multi-green colored dress from the beginning, but then this marker showed up and I had to use it. And look how nice the blending is. Adding that B14 in there. Lizzie, if you sent the marker, thank you. If you didn't, take the praise. For her hair, I really wanted to try something different. I wanted, there's that whole in vogue hairstyle where the bottom of your hair is colored, but the top is the natural grow out. I wanted to actually try that with some green, but I didn't want to go too vibrantly green. I wanted this subtle, almost chlorine colored hair. That's really what I was going with, is that color my blondes get in the summer when they swim too much. Because it's a good color green on hair. So I'm really playing around with how to color the hair and make it realistic looking to the trend of the hairstyle instead of looking ridiculous and campy. While there is a large cartoon spider on her head, I felt the need for a little bit of realism in how the hair looks. Don't ask, it makes sense in my head. It really does. But here I am coloring up the fun image. And I think in the end, I got where I wanted to be. I wish I had gone with a different combination for the browns. I feel like it's just too saturated, the 700 series. I thought if I use the 700 and I use the greens that I use, they could actually kind of blend nicely into one another. But come to find out, you actually need the stark juxtaposition between the two colors for the fade to look good. So live and learn. Next time I will try this technique again with the hair, and we'll try it with a different combination of colors. But I think it came out fun. So now I'm going in with the green. And again, if you've ever watched one of my videos before, you know I use the same collection of colors in multiple places. So her dress, her eyes, and the spider's spots, because I can, all got the same combination of green colors. And yes, I just kept it simple today. I just kept it that G20 family. So using that G20, the G24, and the G29, because there's a really great contrast between the three that allows great highlights and lowlights between everything. Why did I do the spider green? Because it's St. Patrick's Day. Now, my people are Irish. I've always taken great pride in my Irish heritage, and St. Patrick's Day is my Irish holiday. So in my house, corned beef and cabbage get made. I make soda bread from scratch. I cook. So when I have an opportunity to play with St. Patrick's themed projects, I'm all over it. And you get a green spotted spider. That was the whole point of that. I think I finally, by the way, have found a tongue coloring combination that doesn't make me annoyed. I've been really, I don't know, I've never found a color to color a tongue that I'm like, oh, that looks good. But this one wasn't bad. This was the R43, R46, and R89 for the low light. And while you can't actually see her tongue, because it's so little, it doesn't look like she's bleeding from the face. That's really the problem I come up with, is it looks like she's got a weird growth coming out of her mouth, or she's just bleeding. This one could be a tongue? I don't know. It's me. It's a problem I have. You try to go with a realism color and it looks like a growth. And anyway, for the spider, I wanted him to feel extra hairy because he's a hairdresser. So there's lots of flicked in dark gray into his body and head, just to help with that movement of potentially him being a furry friend. Yeah. I did make a mistake, and I only caught it here in post-editing. I meant to go in and color his eyes, not color his eyes, but give a subtle yellow hint to his eyes, because when you add a little bit of color within the eyeball, it makes, again, it's a giant cartoon character, but it makes the realism of the eye look a little bit, because no eye is actually perfectly white. I just happened to forget. And I almost forgot to color his tongue, but I got it in the end. I fussy cut the image out, and after fussy cutting it, I realized I was going to need to pull out my X-Acto knife, and this is just my little finger X-Acto knife, and really remove the white between his legs, because otherwise it didn't work. And my art journal isn't white, it's a manila color, if that's a color still. That was a color, like, do you guys remember when you, okay, for people my age, do you remember when you were in school, it was manila paper? It wasn't like tan paper, it was manila paper. And like, it's not a term you hear anymore, and I don't know why. So here's my art journal, and actually here's some pages in the past that I've done with Oddball Art. I've got my clouds, I've got my critters, I've got more clouds, ironically a different set of clouds. And one of the things I do in my art journal is when I have excess acrylic paint, I just scrape it into the pages and let it dry, and then reuse it someday. And this combination of yellow and greens was perfect for an underpinning of today's project. However, it was way too much. So I pulled out my gesso, and I pulled out actually just kind of it's not a paintbrush. I don't know. It's a brush. We're going to use it for, but it's not, I wouldn't call it, oh wow, I'm having a total moment here. I use them all the time. Palette knife. It's not a palette knife. It's more brush-like than a palette knife is. But it has no actual bristles. And I love it with gesso because it doesn't ruin the bristles of a paintbrush. I need to go out and buy just a ton of really cheap brushes and designate them just for gesso. There's a grit within gesso that just with repetitive use can destroy a good paintbrush. So I don't ever put gesso on a good paintbrush. And I don't have any, like, I went through my stock and got rid of all the crappy paintbrushes I owned. Actually, I gave them to my children, and my children use them happily. But now I don't have any brushes that are good for gesso. So I use this paint scraper, and it works great. I wanted to use my stencils, because I love stencils, and this is, if you can't tell, one of my favorite ones, and just spray some ink through it. I'm getting back into my spray ink. Thank you, Distress Oxide Spray, for doing that. Ironically, do not use any Distress Oxide Spray here. But I spray through the spray through the stencil, and then I shake off extra ink onto the project, and then I press the stencil into it, giving you 3 different looks from all the same moment and technique. I'm just using a white towel to sop up the worst of it, and then using that same stencil, I'm going to take some heavy body acrylic paint. It's just it's a nice green color. I have so much paint. This is not my good paint. This is my cheap crafting paint. It's not cheap, but you know what I mean. Like, I have my really good heavy body acrylics that I use when I'm painting a canvas, but when I'm in my art journal, I try to avoid the really expensive stuff and use more of a craft friendly paint. And I've had these heavy body paints from Diane Wakely forever, and it's a good green color. It's not too bright, it's not too dull, it's just right. It's the Goldilocks of green paints right now. But it let more of that stenciling effect come up. And then I pulled out my Dirty Martini spray ink because it's my favorite. The nozzle actually doesn't spray anymore. It hasn't sprayed for like 2 years. But I love the color, so it is my splatter ink, and I splatter it all the time because it is just the perfect splatter color. Don't ask me why. It just is. I like it. It dries, and the Delusion spray ink dry back so nicely. They don't fade like so many others. I realized I made the project too white around the edges, so I actually just pulled out my Distress Oxide and blended a little mid-lawn around the edges just so it has a halo effect of green going around it. That way, I didn't lose my St. Patrick's Day theme going on here. I apologize. Apparently I'm voice girl today. I've had a long week, and sometimes just stream of conscious blibbing on these videos ends up with me doing funny little voices. I can't help it. It's part of who I am. So there's the background and the underpinning that is going to be the basis for my art journal page. I am so rusty at art journaling. I basically took 2018 off of art journaling. I'm not really certain why, except for maybe I was trying to establish myself as a card maker, and I think I did. I don't know. Like, my mom and my 8-year-old watch these videos, so I've successfully pulled them in. Lizzie watches my videos because she thinks I'm funny. I don't necessarily agree, but she thinks I'm funny. And then there's like 3 other people who sometimes come by and say hello. By the way, if you're here, say hello. Let me know you're there and you're not just my 8-year-old who watches it 42 times. My 8-year-old loves me, though, and she thinks my art is pretty. It's nice to have a fan, even if you made her yourself. But I'm incredibly rusty, so I'm trying to get back into what was my first love in the crafting community. Because this is a St. Patrick's Day themed art journal page, what is more St. Patrick's Day than beer and shamrocks? Beer wasn't going to go into my image, so shamrocks it was. So I used my China marker, which is, if you're not familiar with a China marker, it's also known as a grease marker. It actually goes really, really nicely on top of glass. You can use it over ceramics, stuff like that. And when I'm in an art journal and I have multiple layers of paint, and I have multiple layers of gel and gesso, and I have all this different acrylic mediums built up, sometimes a pencil won't do, and the grease marker is, in fact, what I need to get the artwork onto the page. Now, it's some crappy shamrocks. We're going to use the term artwork real loosely. But if I were drawing, say, like a face, once I had the initial sketch down, I would pull that grease marker back out to lay down my lines again. And I, in fact, like the fact that I still have lines outside of where I'm coloring in. These are all in vogue once upon a time, and you just never see people use them anymore. I'm using a big brush marker. It's got India ink in it, which means that it's movable for a while. Like, when I put it down, you see me put my finger in it and I move it around. But when it dries, it's water resistant. So while it's movable at the moment, and actually if I were to take a little water, I could really move it. Once it dries, you can't move it again. So it's kind of the best of both worlds. You get a little bit of time where you can blend and shade with them. And this tiny little pen I'm using here, the Pitt Artist Pen, same concept. Indian ink inside that you can move around, but once it dries, it is dry. It isn't going anywhere, which is great. But like I said, you get a little bit of wiggle room with it, and you can blend colors like I'm doing here. You can kind of blend that green and that, I used a really dark gray, into each other. I pulled out a different big brush pen and just added some crappy, really crappy lines around the image just to kind of sink everything in. There's no doubt here that your eyes go straight to our lovely Hattie and her hairdresser. But I felt the page was missing something, and sitting on my desk, because I was working on a piece of wood veneer project, I have some rub-ons, and they're reflective and shiny and silver and starry, and I didn't think they would take away from the main project, but they definitely would add a little something. So I'm adding some Tim Holtz rub-ons to the project. Again, rub-ons used to be so mainstream once upon a time. Definitely not what they used to be, but I still like them because when they go down, unlike a sticker that can peel up, a rub-on goes down and stays down, or at least a good quality one. Cheap ones peel up, but that's why we avoid crappy, cheap, inferior products, and we spend just a little bit more for something good. In the Small Talk sticker pack is the sticker that says lucky is a state of mind. How perfect! Yeah, and that's my project today. Yes, it's rough. I am so rough. But I'm going to get back there. I'm going to get back to what I felt confident doing once upon a time. Thanks for watching today. Make sure you go over to the Oddball March Challenge. The whole point this month is if you bring a friend along with you, and one of you win, you both win. So, go participate. Have fun. Play along. You don't have to do a St. Patrick's Day theme. I showed you how you can do a St. Patrick's Day theme. Get involved. And until then, happy crafting.